This is the Lumix G7. It's an old camera with modern features that serve the modern content creator. And the best part about it? It's super cheap. But is it really all that? Let's talk about it. As of 2025, the Lumix G7 is damn near a decade old, and with camera brands pumping out new gear like nobody's business, there's certainly a case to be made about this camera being outdated. And maybe that's true. Honestly, at least a little bit. But for the most part, the Lumix G7 had features that were ahead of its time, so it still holds its own pretty well to this very day. And at only $200 to $300, it certainly offers great value for its cost. It's got a 16 megapixel micro four thirds sensor, so it's great for beginners, enthusiasts, and people who generally only showcase their work online. Heck, even magazines and photo books don't need that many pixels. Now, the smaller range does affect dynamic range a little bit compared to APS-C models of the same generation like the Sony a6000. I definitely noticed that indoors at night and whenever I was shooting fast-moving subject. Its color rendition isn't my cup of tea either. The pinks and reds and magentas in particular are not exactly true to life. I mean, it's easily corrected if you shoot raw and edit your photos, but if you want true to life colors straight out of camera, then you'll be disappointed. Now let's talk about autofocus. It uses a contrast detect autofocus system with 49 focus points, which honestly makes it dated on paper because modern cameras now use face detect autofocus and hundreds more focus points. But to be honest with you, for stills, I never noticed a difference. It's still as snappy and as accurate as any other camera I've ever owned, especially in good lighting. Its face and eye detect feature also works pretty well, so that's great for portraits too. And if your subjects aren't people, then that's not a big deal either because it can switch to a single or cluster focus instantly when you touch the screen. This is great for taking pictures of pets and landscapes or practically anything else without a person's face in the frame. Where it struggles though is tracking fast-moving subjects, like in sports or wildlife for example. For these types of photography, you would need a fast burst rate and a fast and accurate continuous autofocus. And sadly, the Lumix G7 is underwhelming on both accounts. It only has a 6 FPS burst rate, and it has a bad habit of hunting and losing focus when tracking a moving subject. The Lumix G7 does, however, have a 4K photo mode that shoots the burst rate up to 30 frames per second. It also opens you up to a pre-burst mode where the camera takes pictures even before you fully press the shutter button. This is great for skittish and unpredictable subjects like insects and birds. The compromise is that you're getting JPEGs instead of RAW, and the autofocus performance suffers significantly more. Which brings us to video. This camera shoots 4K, has a microphone jack, and a fully articulating screen. All essential for the modern content creator. Again, there are a few caveats. One, it shoots 4K as an MP4. That's good because MP4 is a smaller file, but it's bad because it's less flexible to edit. Now, if you're not the type to heavily color grade your footage anyway, then you probably won't notice the difference, so you're fine there. But second, and I mentioned this earlier, using MP4 on this camera, regardless if it's for video or photos, makes the autofocus super sluggish. For talking head videos like this, it might take you a little bit more time to set up, but you can definitely still make it work. But if you're changing frames constantly, I personally find the experience too excruciating. There are a couple of fixes though. First is to pull focus manually. Now, I'm not a pro videographer, so I can't tell you how easy or hard that is to do. But second is to just use 1080p. This grants you access to AVC HD files and better autofocus. Plus 1080p is all you really need for vertical short form content like YouTube Shorts and TikTok. And so here's the real question. What's it like using this camera in the real world? Well, just holding it? Oh, I love it. It's not trying to be like these tiny mirrorless cameras. In fact, it feels more like a lighter DSLR. It's got a big beefy grip that even arthritic hands can hold, maybe. A body covered in rubber like those Batman films from the 90s. A large EVF that protrudes a little outward like a mannequin's mangina. And a whole lot of useful button styles and switches that I'm out of euphemisms for. Jokes aside, it's really comfortable and ergonomic. I mean, It's got 5 customizable function buttons. That's 3 more than my supposedly professional camera. It also has a top dial that lets you effortlessly switch shooting modes and a switch that lets you easily change focus modes. The touchscreen is also really responsive. So responsive, in fact, that when I look through the EVF, my nose sometimes touches the screen and it changes where my focus point is. Thankfully, I'm Filipino, so it doesn't happen too often. Shout out to all my flat-nosed Pinoys out there. Battery life is also pretty average relative to modern mirrorless cameras. One battery is likely going to be enough if all you're doing is taking photos of your trip to the city, but if you're documenting an event like a wedding, for example, best to take spare batteries. Another thing that's worth noting is that it has a pop-up flash. It's not something that I used and tested out extensively, but it can definitely be useful. Plus, the fact that it's a micro four thirds camera means you have access to a wide variety of lenses that are both cheaper and smaller than their full-frame counterparts. So to summarize, the Lumix G7 is a camera with excellent ergonomics. It has an autofocus that's great for portraits and stills. It shoots 4K with file sizes that aren't too big. It also has a microphone jack and a flippy screen that's essential for the modern content creator. So it's a great camera to start with, but it's also nowhere near perfect. Continuous and tracking autofocus are subpar. The colors aren't true to life. The 4K footage folds apart when heavily color graded, and the burst rate is slow and not suitable for action shots. For a camera that's under $300 in excellent condition though, these are trade-offs that I would gladly make. But let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments below, and as always, happy shooting.